Welcome to another episode of the Flats Nation Podcast. And a big shout out to Brother Dave Fader down Amarada for the awesome music. You can check out more of Dave's phenomenal work on davidfader.com. This is your host, Dave Legier, and before we jump in today's show, I'd like to give a big thanks to our title sponsor for this one, our friends over at Fujifilm. Their lineup of optical products, including the Techno Stabby 1440 binoculars, are really worth checking out. You'll find more details about them in today's show notes, plus we already have some expanded product coverage on flatsnation.com for you to review. And stay tuned. Fujifilm is going to be joining us soon for an in-depth look at all of their Techno Stabby product lineup, including some exciting new models they just released. If you're looking for a pair of high-performance binoculars to help you scout for fish, or just to enhance any of your outdoor adventures, you won't want to miss that one. And today, we are joined once again by my longtime friend, Chris Peterson of Hells Bay Boatworks, that he and his wife, Wendi, have been leading since 2007. Conservation is at the heart of Hells Bay, and Chris, along with Wendi, is deeply involved with organizations like Captains for Clean Water, Bonefish Tarpon Trust, and other fantastic groups dedicated to protecting our marine ecosystems. In this episode, we dive into their latest conservation efforts, what Chris is currently working on, and how you can also get involved. So thanks for coming on board Flats Nation and discussing this topic with us, brother. How you doing today?
I am doing great today. It's I always like to say it's a great day at Hells Bay.
That's awesome to hear. Let's go through the progression of this. Step back in time. What was the tipping point that told Chris, it's time to get some of this madness under control?
Which one?
Yeah, well, this is true. This is true. Basically, with our water quality issues that we're battling here in the state of Florida.
I grew up and, on the waters of Central Florida. And the lakes and creeks and things that I grew up on were just pristine and crystal clear. And that went for a lot of the waters and, tributaries and things that we have. It was so true. And sometimes I feel like an old guy, back when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do, now I've had I'm 62 years old now, and as I look back, back to, the 60s and 70s in Florida and what we had then, and I see where we are today, there's a stark difference. So I started, so I was always very interested in fishing and marine biology. As a kid, everybody wanted to be a marine biologist. What do you want to be when you grow up?
You want to be Jacques Cousteau. I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to watch, Jack. I used to love when those specials came on, and but by the time I got, in high school and college, I just didn't think unless you were the one and only Jacques Cousteau, I didn't think you could make any money in it or anything. So, my path went down. Went to the University of Florida Business School. And, graduated and started into business. But all along that time, I'm still fishing. And, I was seeing the lakes and Indian River and Mosquito Lagoon that I grew up on changing, and very much for the worse. By the time I got out of college, in the 80s, from where it was in the 70s, I could go to the end of the dock and look 10 feet down in the water and tell you if a nickel was heads up or tails, and you could now put your feet in the water off the dock, and I couldn't tell you how many toes I had. The water had gotten that murky, and I didn't know why. I knew kind of why, but I just why was it changing? I didn't understand that. Again, I wasn't a trained marine biologist, although a lot of my electives I took were in, freshwater ecology, limnology, some of these things in college, but just because it was more interesting than, to me, something else. So I've always had an interest in the marine biology, My dad was an acclaimed underwater photographer, although he was also a businessman, but his big hobby was underwater photography. So I grew up being his safety buddy, diving over the years. So I had this great interest in the marine environment. So you start seeing that change. But then as the time we got to, when Wendi and I, like you just said, in 2007, we purchased Hell's Bay, and fishing was. It's still, today, fishing's great, but it's, we've got to really be a steward of the resource. And I think some of the reasons I even got into, building boats and resurrecting Hell's Bay was just because of my love of the water, and I wanted to do something in business that was in and around the marine environment. Was something I could do. So, at our core, that's why Wendi and I are truly interested in marine conservation and preserving and fixing as best we can what we have today. So at the core, we could support different types of different businesses, support different causes, but at our core, we've always been very interested in marine and conservation.
Well, with your business background, I think sometimes that's lost when it comes to the value of recreational fishing in the state of Florida. And you said it best. You take fishing away from Florida, it's a big sandbar.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a huge multi-billion-dollar business annually. A lot bigger than a lot of other industries.
Well, if you even think about just water quality, what are the values of all of the, well, like you said, we're just a big sandbar, just a big desert. If we don't have our water, and I like to say that Florida's water is Florida's soul. So if you take that away from, all of the tourists, just to beaches alone, but just the tourism that's derived off of our water quality, and then the residential development and then where people want to live, the realtors are affected. Everybody in this state is affected by maintaining a really good water ecosystem around us. That's why we're here.
It's very true.
We don't have mountains here.
No.
Some people like to go to the mountains. This is Florida's draw, in my opinion. So
very, very much so. It'd be interesting to see how many people move to Florida or retire to Florida because of our fishing. Bottom line.
Absolutely.
They don't play golf. They don't do this. They love to fish. It's all part of the lifestyle that you and I are both directly involved with. It's amazing. So how many different conservation groups are you now working with at Hell's Bay Boatworks?
A bunch.
I know it's quite a few.
It is quite a few, and some we do a lot with. Some we contribute to annually. We just there's the Tampa Bay Waterkeepers getting ready to have an event, and we're going to sponsor that, and we do stuff with BTT, and we do things with a myriad of even smaller organizations. There's a smaller organization that promotes, water quality and the fishing lifestyle at the mouth of the St. Johns River up in the Timucuan estuaries and preserve and areas like that they're concerned with, and we support them through their annual tournament. But some of our bigger ones are Guy Harvey's a good personal friend of mine. I'm on his board of directors, so that's important to us. And Wendi is on the board of Captains for Clean Water. And we really, Captains has come just, light years. And then I'm politically active with the Everglades Trust. So, and so is Captains. So a lot of these organizations work together,
sure,
and work together well. So, some we financially support more than others. Some we're very active in as a voice, looking to help spread awareness and good political favor for those causes and for what those causes support, like the restoration of the Everglades and, the restoration of the St. Johns and the areas of the tributary. And, we do a lot also with Watermen's Alliance, which is a group of guides and concerned people in the in the Indian River and Mosquito Lagoon area. So there's smaller little groups that are more focused very regionally or very locally that we support, all the way up to someone like Captain's, who's very focused on a state and national basis.
Very true. For those who are unfamiliar with the issue in other parts of our country or world, since we on Flats Nation have visitors from all over, what is the real issue here in Florida conservation-wise? Is it water quality? Is it water fisheries management? What do you see is the big picture here?
I believe it's water. It's water quality and quantity. Now, you may not think in a state that seems like it's, flooded after hurricanes and a big soggy place that water quantity would be an issue, but having enough water, the ecosystems need that proper mix of salt and fresh water. A little too much fresh water is not good for an estuary, as we know, when they go and dump Lake O out to the tributaries of the St. Lucie or the Caloosahatchee, when they let it loose.
See in my backyard every day.
Okay, not good, but then if they turned it off 100%, the Caloosahatchee is a natural, waterway that has, annually a certain amount of water that ebbs and flows. It's still got fresh water trickling out of there, and drying that up and becoming completely salt is not right for the estuary either. It's that perfect confluence of the sweet and the briny water. You take the Swanee River, as it comes down, some of the historic oyster bars, and like they call them oyster reefs. Those reefs, if you look at them, what they kind of do is those oysters kind of grow in an area that they actually kind of dam up to some extent some of the fresh water behind them. And if they don't get the same quantity of water coming down all the time, now those oyster reefs are dying. And what they're actually doing is forming closer in because they're not getting the same volume of water. Now, with that said, I'm talking about volume now, but also a big problem is the nutrients that we put into the water and all the various places they come from. Really, water quality, there are a few big, I'm going to say, hemorrhages that we are trying to take care of, but it's also 1,000 little cuts that just cause a big problem at times, too. So, what's our issue here in Florida? Water quantity, water quality. Now, as far as game fishery management, I believe FWC is probably one of the better fisheries managers from a governmental side of things anywhere in the United States. I think they do a really, really good job of trying. They've got a lot of biologists. We always think of them as just the law enforcement end, but that's not even I don't even think that's the biggest part of FWC by any means. It's really the fisheries management, the biologists, the managers that they have for managing game and fish. And quite frankly, I think nature is somewhat fluid, but I think they do a pretty good job of reacting. And I think the commission that they have there now and the commissioners in place really take it to heart to try to get it right. Do they always get it right? Probably not. Do any of us? We all, but they've got to make some guesses. But I think they really guess to do the right thing on, when they need to, reduce back the amount of take. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They really want everybody to get to be able to fish and do as much as they want, but we've got to preserve that. And I think for the most part, they do a pretty good job of trying to balance that. It's not easy, and I just want to recognize that. So I think game management, fish management, fisheries management, for the most part, they do a pretty good job, and they're diligent. Some of the issues with bonefish, though, for instance, in the Keys, you could say some of that is from spawning areas and where the spawning aggregations are being disrupted, but it's not in Florida. That spawn comes up and gets in the Gulf loop, in the big loop in the Gulf, and then gets kind of cast into the Everglades and the Keys. And if you're not having enough of that, or if it's not strong enough, or if it's not good enough, or if it's been affected by its own water pollution in Belize and Mexico and Cuba, you'll see the detrimental effects basically up the Gulf Stream, really, once you consider the loop and as it comes around, as it spreads that spawn. So, that's something that game managers in Florida can't really regulate. We can certainly advocate for, which BTT and other organizations do internationally. It all becomes so very complicated. So, and then of course in Florida, some of our game management, it depends on what they're doing in Louisiana. I mean, if they allow them to harvest 75-year-old tarpon in Louisiana, those fish have migrated from here to there. They're migrating along that coast amongst multiple states. So it also, our fishery depends on the game management in other places. And I don't know that much about some of the other game management. I just know that FWC with what they have what tools they have in the box, they do a pretty good job with it.
Well, and that was one of the things that amazed me with tarpon is how far they will actually migrate. It's amazing.
Well, it's amazing. I was tagging tarpon up in Apalachicola with Jerry Alt from the University of Miami, and he then confidentially shared with me some of the exact real-time tracking of those that we had tracked, and we tracked migrating fish that we caught and then tagged on the bars of Apalachicola, and within like 4 or 5 days, they were already at the mouth of the Mississippi. So they'd already gone a good route, and interesting, like I said, I saw the real-time data, some of the interesting places of where they went. Some of them traveled, they were along the shore of Apalachicola and then traveled the inshore route along the Panhandle, which I was really shocked. I thought they would just run down the outside, but they were moving along some of those inside routes and where they went was really, also very fascinating. So,
what is your level of involvement with Captains for Clean Water, which, if I'm not mistaken, is one of your favorites, especially with Wendi?
Mm-hmm.
You guys have been involved with them for probably pretty much since inception.
Since the beginning, yeah. Hells Bay is one of 4 what they call legacy partners. We've been there for a long time, and then we do provide substantial financial support. They are, it's different organizations, or some of them are good and some of them are sort of good, but they're still good. These guys are they're the standard bearer of conservation and really focusing on what needs to get done and then executing a plan. And they're good stewards of their funding resources. So when you give them $50 for a raffle ticket that we raffle off a boat for them, that money's really going to programs that really get things done. And you look at the needle, what they've been able to move in the Everglades, and a bunch of captains, that were just out of work during some of the really nastiest of the blue-green algae bloom, really put together a great organization that is extremely effective. They just don't put on a gala and talk about it. They get stuff done. And they've also stayed true. What I mean that is they've stayed true to their mission, so they really keep the respect of the legislators and the power brokers in Tallahassee and in Washington. Sometimes that's hard to do, but they can really cross the aisle and really are effective. They're not fancy lobbyists. They're not dropping lobster dinners on anybody, but they get stuff done. And you got to appreciate that with the captains group.
Very true.
So,
what was the biggest hurdle to overcome other than funding for Captains from Clean Water? Do you feel exposure? Has it been media coverage?
They've gotten good media coverage, but it's not that they don't work. That's just it. There's such a great grassroots organization, and they've really been effective. Chris Whitman and Daniel Andrews are just, the thing is, they're genuine people. They're not somebody in a fancy set of, lobbyist shoes pounding the hallways. We go up to Tallahassee or up to Washington, and, we've got fishing jackets and fishing sunglasses and fishing hats on, walking the aisles. I mean, we are, when they're talking, they're talking they're walking the walk and talking the talk. because they know it. And so, like, again, that's what makes, I think, it's the beauty of the captain's group, is that they're just genuine. And people don't think they're there trying to get something they shouldn't. They're there passionately fighting for our resources. So hats off to them. They've done a great job.
Yeah, that they have. What was the original battle plan and bullet points written down for Captains for Clean Water, and how do you feel they've executed on that?
I don't know that I know the battle plan, but I can. Well, I mean, from my perspective, when we got involved, there was some things going on, and we just like I was talking about. I'd known Chris Whitman in particular. He was a Hells Bay guide. He was guiding out of a Hells Bay, and I knew him as a captain down in the Boca Grande area. Caught tarpon with him and chartered with him. Before he was doing what he was doing, and I just knew he's a great guy to start with. And we kind of threw in behind him when they were wet behind the ears, and we didn't. Wendi and I said, I don't know if they're getting anywhere, but you gotta like them. And so when we threw in behind them, it was just, it's kind of like some of these investors, they might buy a bunch of penny stocks and say, well, this one might work. Let's put a little into this and see where it goes. And they just, they just took off. And, Daniel Andrews was really young. He was in his 20s. And but he dove in with both feet and just learned the policy, the politics, and really dug in. I mean, it wasn't just they weren't half-hearted at it. And as time has gone by, I think we're 10 years into Captains for Clean Water right now, and they have just perfectly matured. They've become extremely effective. So they're just an effective voice. And one of the things that they do well is communicate. And what I like to tell people is I didn't have to give up my day job of building boats when the water quality went really, really, really bad. They did. And now what they are, they're to me, they're that canary in the vine. They're constantly keeping their finger on the pulse of what's happening. But what really moves, policy is we the people.
Very true.
And I can make boats every day, and I know I don't have to keep my finger, me personally necessarily as a boat builder or other people, I don't have to keep my pulse on what sneaky thing might be happening in Washington or Tallahassee at some point. But when they need us, they send out a call to action, and they get great results. If they need you to push a button and simply type out a quick little note to a legislator, they make it easy on us to do that so that they can overwhelm, an issue. If they're not getting anywhere they want, like we did on 2508, we went and circled the Capitol and took a bunch of boats right up onto the Capitol grounds and made our voices known. Got 100 captains from all over Florida to show up and stare down out of the gallery into the Senate, while they were making bad decisions, but
trying to pull it in and run.
Then we were able to get the Great White Knight Ron DeSantis to come in and veto that bill at the end. We won the war on that when we lost several battles, which was very disheartening, I think, to a lot of the fishing community to see that sometimes things don't go our way, but at the end of the day, we were able to prevail on that one, and it was a great victory. But that's the power of captains, And I also would like to say to people who come up and put in the effort, when they saw that we lost like a vote and a battle in the Senate, Florida Senate, trust me, the governor's office was watching that. Had 3 of us shown up and tried to get something done, maybe or maybe not, we would have not gotten to use some of that political clout. And actually, if the governor's like, hey, 3 guys showed up. But when you see that response, the governor comes in and did the right thing, which we're very thankful for.
Yeah, he did a phenomenal job with that one in particular, that's for sure.
Well, in my opinion, he keeps doing that over and over again. And I think, at his core, you look at it, he just says, however the political winds are blowing one way or the other, he just kind of does the right thing. I don't think he reads a poll. He just takes a moral compass and goes, what's the right thing to do on this? And then he's got the backbone to do it. So, we're very thankful for some of the leadership we've got in Florida right now. And like I said, the Senate on that one, I don't think made the right choice, but time and time again, the legislature in the state of Florida over the last decade has predominantly really come through with funding. Senate Bill 10, which kicked this whole Everglades thing off, has been great. They've put hundreds of millions of dollars now into focusing on the Mosquito Lagoon, water quality in the Mosquito Lagoon, and other estuaries, tributaries. They've guaranteed funding for Florida Springs time and time again. I don't want to make it sound like on 2508 I disagreed, but then again, I don't disagree with. I love my wife Wendi to death, but I don't agree with her on everything. But I still think So
I get it.
I hope there's some senator out there listening to me going, "Oh, damn, Peterson, he's out there." But no, it's not by any means. The legislature has done a really, really good job, and particularly in the last decade, of paying attention and funding and trying to get this ship turned on water quality throughout the state. In the Everglades, the funding on that's been phenomenal. We're getting some great, huge funding this year in the headwaters of the St. Johns River, which will make a difference for the Everglades and the St. Lucie discharges, because some of that water will be diverted up into some STA type of things, where we'll clean the water and then it'll end up in the St. Johns, which is where it belonged anyway. So some of that water can be diverted so we don't get those. It'll be more like a shock absorber for the St. Lucie, at the same time diverting a lot of water that should have naturally gone to the St. Johns. It's also being diverted to the St. Lucie. But that's they've appropriated this year alone $400 million for that one project. So, and like I said, over $100 million a year for Indian River lagoon issues over the last 3 or 4 years. So, we have been from the state. The state has heard us, the people in Florida, and they are us. I mean, I've taken some of these guys fishing. They love to fish. They are us. So that's a good thing. So we are getting cooperation out of particularly the state. And then when I've gone to Capitol Hill looking for various things from Congress, the one thing in this partisan world that we're in, it amazes me. Everybody from Matt Gaetz to Debbie Wasserman Schultz can be on the same side of the water issue for Florida. It's great. It's great to see that they can get together and do something, that they don't have to argue about everything. That as far as the Florida delegation, if you're left, right, you're the purple party, the green party, whatever party you are, red, blue, something in between, they do agree that we need to be focused on Florida's water issues, which is great.
Well,
that's not to say
as a whole, as a nation. I mean,
true. And
we remember as kids, rivers catching on fire. So, and I like to use that example because everybody seems to think that the sky's falling. No, I remember a time where it was a lot worse.
Well, I remember my grandmother and grandfather on my dad's side lived up on the Chesapeake. And when I was a kid, when I was talking about the pristine waters we had here in the 70s, the Chesapeake was decimated. And the Chesapeake now has made a tremendous resurgence. They've done things like we're working on here, which is getting the septics away from the watershed. We're behind them on that, but there's proof that the stripers and the crabs and the oysters can come back from what essentially was a dead bay. And all your menhaden that feed all of our tarpon spawn in the Chesapeake. So, a very important resource and an important resource for Florida because, like I said, that's where all these bait fish are coming from.
Exactly. So, these tarpon are flowing all over the place.
Well, the menhaden, they may not chase them all the way into the Chesapeake, but that's where those menhaden go, and up at least on the East Coast, that's a major spawning ground. So they'll migrate up into the Chesapeake spawn. So then, of course, that we benefit from that spawn as it comes down, and those very nutrient-rich fish are feeding our tarpon and jacks and sharks and everything else. If you've ever been into a big Binhaven ball, everything's in there feeding on those poor little guys.
Well,
that, the mullet, all of those things.
I've said this on other radio shows and things of that nature. You can't wipe out your nursery and expect to have any fish left.
Well, and that's where when the question you started off with, Dave, was what's in, what are what's our issue, I guess, with our water, or is it fisheries? It all starts with the water and water quality, because without good water quality, you can't have healthy estuaries. And without healthy estuaries, you don't have great fishing. And then this is where it really makes business is important to me as a business guy who makes boats. You don't need a really nice fishing boat if there's nothing to fish for. Exactly. It's kind of like the fresh water's kind of like our plankton of the ocean. It's the bottom of the food chain to some extent, or the top of the food chain, however you want to know. Be the bottom of the food chain. Everything depends on it, right down to me making a living building boats. It really depends on the quality of that water and the quality for you to have fun recreating on it and finding fish. And the fish have got to be happy, and their fry and their nurseries and the estuary itself. It all flows from really healthy water. And like I said, quantity and quality.
Yeah, very true. Very true. What about the situation that we've heard with Apalachicola or the Bay and the lack of fresh water? Do you know where we stand on that scenario with getting some water?
Yeah. Well, I think there was a federal court case. It was Florida versus Georgia. It wasn't a football game.
No.
It was a lawsuit. And I think Florida lost. So I don't know where we stand with that. If, what we always say here in Florida is Georgia sucks, and they've been sucking the water out of that estuary that comes down to the Apalachicola. So I think there's things we can do, and there's things that we're working on. But whatever's coming out of Georgia, we kind of lost the battle at the federal court level on that. So I don't know where we go from there on that. So
back to Captains for Clean Water. What is their primary funding source? Is it membership, merchandise, donations? What do you know how they're really operating as far as economically, and where do they need the most help?
Well, the skiff raffle we just completed is a large chunk of their funding. So, that is broad-based. That's $50 at a time, $50 at a pop from selling tickets to a large group of people from across the country. They get large donations from individuals. So next week, if you want to write a check, Dave, have at it. They also have an annual Restore Gala in November down in Fort Myers, normally at the at Old Edison Home, and it's a really great event. And they don't sell like some people have these auctions of items per se. They really just do a cash call at the dinner and raise a tremendous amount of money. So, it's multifaceted. Of course, they sell a lot of $25 hats. That certainly helps. Shirts, merchandise. I guess I'd say is that the funding is not way. I don't think and I'm not on the board. Wendi would be able to tell you way better than I can. I get more of the advocacy with them. She doesn't go pounding on the doors of Congress or circle the Capitol with boats or anything like that. But she's on the board and she's like the den mother over there. So she could tell you a lot better than I could. So,
I can see that with Wendi.
I can tell you. And their board is a very strong and serious board. The guy, their chairman now is the guy who was the head of the investment company that bought Yeti. So he now lives in that area, and he's the chairman. And you've got people like Chauncey Goss, whose dad was the director of the CIA. He was just down at their annual meeting, and Chauncey is also now the chairman of the South Florida Water Management District. So they've got a great board to keep everything going and properly managed, a very serious board. So they're well managed and they're well guided. And I wouldn't say they're well funded. You always want to have more funds and have a rainy day fund someday and those sort of things. But the people, we've taken care of them, because I think, like I described earlier, I think a lot of people see that. I think a lot of people see that, one, the effectiveness and the genuineness of that organization. I just can't say enough good things, one, about them and what they've been able to accomplish.
I know you donate a skiff to their efforts. Is that now a yearly?
Oh, yeah.
For Hell's Bay?
Absolutely. We just raffled off one last weekend. I pulled the ticket, and a young man, just thrilled beyond thrilled, from Port Orange, was the lucky recipient. I like to say we're all lucky recipients from that raffle, because financially it does very well. And that means that we all, many hands made light work on that by raising all that money, which is great. And now we're already, matter of fact, I've got a call tomorrow with the operations director about getting the specs and whatnot, and get with them on what they need to provide. Now, it's not only do we donate the skiff and we build the skiff, but we get Mercury Racing to donate the engine. Ramblin' Trailers donates. I don't pay for the trailer. It just shows up here. So, yes, we donate the boat, but a lot of those components, SeaDeck does a really super nice SeaDeck package on it. Orbis puts in a whole bunch of, is that raffle, you also get Orbis products and Turtle Box, and Yeti puts a bunch of product, makes it a really cool package. But, all of those people, we all get together and start talking about when and what, and calls tomorrow. We just raffled the boat off, and we're starting on the next raffle boat now, getting the planning done to get it built, get it marketed, and sell tickets again for next year. So since you didn't win this one, because I know I didn't want it, you still can buy tickets shortly. Hopefully, normally about July they'll start selling them. Normally around ICAST time. I don't know the exact date, and you can still get in on next year's boat, Dave.
I've been thinking about that, but I told myself if I won, I would have to donate the boat so that it doesn't look like any kind of conflict of interest. So,
and now there's a huge bin of tickets, and I just stick my hand in there and rattle it around till I find something that feels like a one. That was my worry this year, is I was hoping I wasn't going to end up pulling like two stuck together out of it. kind of still down in the mass. I kind of rub my fingers together to make sure, okay, that's just one. Okay, good. Let's pull this one out. So.
Well, I think the next version of this, let me drop a recommendation, is we need to have one of the SUV manufacturers to donate something to tow it with.
Well, if you know one, or a dealer, I'm sure the donation would not be turned away. There's no doubt about it. But that would be awesome to help what I would call enriching the pot on the raffle. And sometimes on the raffle it does even get a little contentious, because you'll have competing companies busting to get in there, and we just like for instance, we've got some competitors, different, like for your GPS unit. If Simrad, they're the one that donated, and they're the one that came to plate. If somebody else wants to come in later, we stick. If they're going to continue to donate, you got to take from those that particularly for the skip this one.
Sure.
You got to keep going with the people that have been your partners and be loyal to them. And we'll get 2 or 3 different manufacturers all of a sudden that want to jump in on it. Let's say 3 different engine companies. Well, Mercury Racing has donated since the very beginning. You don't throw them out in lieu of someone else right now just because they can give you an engine. But they can certainly donate to captains. Another engine company could give them an engine to raffle off at a different time of year.
Exactly
about to do that. So so there's in-kind donations from the marine industry, and they get a ton of that, actually, particularly in times of need. It was one thing captain you don't know that maybe do or do not know the captains do, is they also support captains, and they will raise money, and they had a bunch of brands donate product that they gave away to hurricane affected captains that were losing times and and they lost all of their rods or whatever. So in the times of these natural disasters that affect the fishing community and particularly the working captains, they go to battle and go to industry. Now I can't go and give them all new boats, but other companies can give in kind the things they need. The fishing rods, the apparel, the and cash donations, and then captains helps filter that fairly into the affected community, which is just something I don't think that they don't really advertise that much, but something they certainly do that's also great. Just great goodwill for what they do.
Well, I was aware of it after Ian hit us.
Okay.
Their efforts on that, and I applaud them for that.
Was that the last hurricane we had down there? What was the one we had this year? Last year. It was two of them, what? Two years apart?
We had two this year.
I keep forgetting the names of which. We had Ian and we had whatever the other one was. They did it for both. I know they did it for two of them. When you guys got hammered down there on the southwest coast, 2 years apart?
We've had three storms.
Three storms?
In 2 years.
In 2 years. Well, okay. After all three of them then. They've been there for the captain's community, which is just another statement to the goodwill and genuineness of that organization. So,
from an organization standpoint, I would think that Captains for Clean Water must have some huge legal bills to pay. Who's helping with those legal efforts? Do they have a firm or a staff attorney now that helps them negotiate some of these attacks that they may receive? Are you aware of it?
I don't know. I'm not aware that Captains is actually filing lawsuits. Sometimes the fight is with, you might have an entity. I just saw one recently where the reservoir is under attack from a Buddhist organization because it's disrupting the tranquility of the area. Well, they're suing whoever, the Water Management District or the Army Corps of Engineers, but they'll chime in from I don't know if Captains does, but things like the Everglades Trust might file an amicus brief or something like that in favor of the reservoir. So that's how they end up fighting those fights. I'm not so sure Captains is normally ever because normally somebody fighting the regulatory process.
I was just curious.
The permitting. So they'll sue South Florida Water Management District over if they felt they improperly issued a permit in favor of the reservoir or something. That's kind of typically how that would go. So this Captains, I don't know that, and I don't know that. I may be wrong, but I don't think they have huge legal bills.
I know you've been involved with our elected officials in Tallahassee that have helped or not. Feel free to give a shout out to those that you feel that have really helped out this cause that we have with improving our water quality and quantity as we've discussed.
Well, I could go on for the next hour giving you names probably of those that have helped out in many, many ways. So it's one of those things. If I give you all those names, you just try to. I'm going to leave somebody out because it's numerous. But I will tell you, in Congress, probably one of our biggest warriors is Congressman Brian Mast out of the Fort Pierce area. He is a warrior for our military warriors and the Everglades. Those are and the water quality for Florida. I know those are things that both of those are important to him, but he has been really a champion in Congress. Both of our senators, like I said, everybody in the entire delegation from Florida up in now the bigger problem is sometimes, and one of the things that I've heard, I'll go and see a congressman or somebody, let's say from Iowa, because they all vote. You need votes. It's not just the Florida people that get to vote on Florida issues. So, I'll go and I'll be talking to somebody from Iowa, and they'll look at me like, I was been here for 30 years. 20 years ago, didn't we already vote on this? Why are you Everglades people always up here hammering on about the Everglades? And I got to tell them, I said, yes, you voted on SERP, the plan, and you said this is great, but this is just like me telling one of my kids, sure, go buy a Lamborghini. and not giving them a check. I think this is a great idea,
Oh, yeah.
And when I was like, you guys haven't, we're now here to fund what you guys thought was a good idea. And so educating some of those that really aren't in Florida is important. And then you start getting tied up in all the appropriations, and things get wrapped up into things like the WARDA bill or the farm bill. Some of these things, funds come out of those. And I can tell you, a couple of years ago, we're trying to work. We were waiting on some sort of recommendation from the Office of Management and Budget, and we had them put a placeholder in the bill, but it hadn't been approved or authorized. And so I'll tell you one thing captains did. They turned on an email campaign to whatever bureaucracy or wherever it was at Office of Management and Budget, and they got a call from the White House that said, okay, we put it in the bill. Would you please turn off the grassroots effort?
Exactly.
And you're like, wow, that was
that works.
That worked. So that does happen. But again, that doesn't happen just because captains does it. You have to respond to that email to overwhelm, the Office of Management and Budget to please put this language in, approve it into the bill, So it's we the people, and it's just, they're the catalyst, they're the siren, they're the little kids screaming, like that little girl. I always like to sometimes think about it, that at Whoville, it takes everybody right down to that last little child to scream to be heard sometimes. But they hear us when we start screaming.
Well, I know the governor's done some phenomenal work when it comes to helping address these issues. Taken on a higher level, and I've made this recommendation or made mention of it to captains in clean water in the past. Some of this, what we're dealing with is, quite frankly, it's water pollution. It may not be oil, but it's water pollution. And I've asked this question, and they promised that they would take it under consideration and let me know. But has anybody approached the Coast Guard in helping with this water issue? I mean, I even sent them the recommendation from, I'm a Coast Guard veteran. I think a lot of the misconception with the Coast Guard is that the only time you see them dealing with water quality issues is when it's oil. But that's not their stated purpose. It's any hazardous material discharge into the navigable waters of the United States. Well, that's a big body of water, including the Caloosahatchee, because there's channel markers, so it's navigable water. Has anybody thought about saying, look, for us to be able to effectively deal with the alphabet soup, have we thought about using a component of the alphabet soup, the United States Coast Guard, to say, look, we've got a water problem here where we're having pollution that's creating algae blooms and things of that nature. Has anybody thought to say, hey, can somebody take a look into this and maybe start issuing citations?
Yeah, well, I hadn't really thought about that. That's an interesting thought. I like that. However, as you know, we have a lot of laws that, quite frankly, government doesn't enforce.
No.
I mean, I'm not want to be too political, but if you look at the border, we've got plenty of laws about illegal immigration, and my God, we've got, and we've been inundated over the last several years because it's not being enforced. And so I don't know. I don't know who pulls those levers, like at the Coast Guard, and gets interested. I don't know that one, but it's an interesting angle. But like I said, it depends. Who. Sometimes you don't know who you're fighting. So
it's true. I mean, my biggest concern with some of this has been, as we've discussed in the past, dealing with the Corps of Engineers. Well, the state of Florida as a whole only has so much leverage that they can pull on a federal agency.
Mm-hmm.
But my thought process was, and this may be a little bit controversial, but I'm known for that from time to time, is that, so let's put one federal agency with its ability to mitigate an issue or bring awareness to an issue to be able to say, okay, stop. This needs to be reviewed as to how this is being managed, because at the end of the river, this stuff is turning as black as the ace of spades and it's killing stuff. So we've got a problem here with water flow management, as you so eloquently put it, water delivery is as big as an issue as water quality. Matter of fact, too much fresh water in an area, as we have seen, has just been disastrous.
Right, and lack thereof can be as disastrous.
Look what's happened to Florida Bay because we've pinched off all the water coming.
Exactly. There you go. That's hypersalination down there in those basins because of the lack of flow.
Right.
At that point,
and losing the turtle grass there because we don't have enough freshwater influx, just like with oysters, to be able to help keep that ecosystem in balance. And I've even thought about this in the past. Some of this battle that we're having with these big snakes is because we've turned it into a savanna. You start putting more water in there as it was intended to have, well, it's kind of hard for those snakes to lay eggs underwater. You'll make it a lot easier to combat that problem, even though I personally feel we've lost that war. Unless we start getting Florida real cold, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, I think we've lost that battle. But, we've seen these scenarios where water flow is critical. We have too much coming down the Caloosahatchee. We have too much coming down the St. Louis Sea. We've seen the effects of that. And yet we're starving the glades, which to me is a perfect way to help uptake some of these nutrient loads, to be able to and get water flowing through there again.
Well, you have to be careful with that, too, because, for instance, I believe that sawgrass, for instance, which is what the river grass primarily is, only flourishes in the absence of phosphorus. You can't have that nutrient-laden water going through there, or you will have a river of cattails, which does very nicely in phosphorus. So that, yes, it's going to be a great filter. Well, that's what's going on with the reservoir. The reservoir is to put some of that water in there and to get it clean to a level that it can be allowed to go into the Everglades clean and then out into Florida Bay the way it was supposed to. So those are really, treatment ponds, that big reservoir. Yes, it's a shock absorber, but it's also a treatment pond to get that water to a quality. And then some of the issues, Ben, and I may be wrong on this, I'm going to talk off the cuff, and I'm happy to be corrected. But I think there's some agreements with some of the Indians, either the Miccosukees or the Seminoles down there. We're not allowed to let water flow into there that's not of a certain purity. So you can't let it flow through there and that's a good thing, unless it's clean water.
That's right.
So it's got to be. You can't just send crappy water south. We got to send clean
we can't
water.
Turn it into.
We got to send clean water south, not crap soup south. We can't do that.
Whom sponsor-wise would you like to see join, or would be an excellent fit for Captains for Clean Water? Because I know you work with a lot of these entities like Mercury Racing and Yeti.
A lot of them do. And sometimes it's just a matter of budget. And I think every marine company who derives their jobs and livelihood from individual captains right up to the biggest marine manufacturers out there, every one of them should be supporting that organization and the other little ones too, the smaller ones. Things like the Calford Conservation Group up in Jacksonville, or the Tampa Bay Waterkeeper, or they all could use. They're all doing good, but it's not just captains. It's all of them. Although, like I said, captains is near and dear to my heart. The Bonefish Tarpon Trust is near and dear to my heart. A lot of these are. So I think they all have. And the other thing too, the Everglades Foundation, phenomenal organization, and has a lot of political clout, but in a different way than captains. And I always say that a lot of these organizations are, when working well together, they're like chess pieces. Everybody's got everybody. Not everybody moves the same or in the same direction. The rook goes one way, the knight goes another. So, but you got to play this chess game and use the pieces at the right time for the right strategy. Sometimes it's not one or the other, and each of them have their own strengths. And that's what's really cool about it. Is there's really, in my mind, there's not too many competing organizations doing the same thing. They're different in their own right, and they've got their own focuses, and they've got their own part of the game to play. So I think every organization ought to be doing more than they do. I wish they would. I think we do as much as we can. I mean, Wendi and I what Wendi likes to say is that, we're a mom and pop company. You got Wendi mom, Chris pop, so we're a mom and pop organization. But, sometimes we swing a little bigger than we are. But we think it's important. And personally, at my core and her core, it's important to us personally. Some of these bigger companies, they get managed by people up in the Northeast or in the Midwest that they don't really quite understand it. And sometimes people come and go. I've seen it where, sometimes it's in these companies, it's amongst the executive level and those making these type of decisions. Sometimes it's musical chairs. One day somebody's coming from Microsoft, and the next thing you know, they're in charge of Mercury Marine. Just different types of C-level executives. And maybe they might not understand really why this is important to them as some of the C-level people change. And sometimes you get more support, sometimes you don't. So that's how that works. Now I will say also another big kudos, Orvis is still a family-owned company, and they do a tremendous amount with us, shoulder to shoulder. The CEO of Orvis, Simon Perkins, he gets it, and that's great to see. And they are a big company, but they're still a family-owned company run by a family. So I don't know if you call them mom and pop, but at their size, but it's nice to see that, because if the family doesn't change and the core values and what's important to them doesn't change as much as it does in what I'm going to call like a publicly traded or an investor-led group.
Exactly.
Happens. So it's a challenge for any of these organizations to keep long-term focus from some of these very big companies.
Do you feel, Chris, that we need to be watching as concerned citizens that are probably maybe not directly involved with this? What do they need to pay attention to help keep this effort moving forward, in addition to monetary support, naturally? But
they need to pay attention to their emails and their social media or any other type of communications that come from people like Captains or the Riverkeeper or Tampa Bay Watch. When they need that grassroots voice, don't just go, oh, they're asking me to send an email again to my. They don't want to make it easy. You click on the button and they kind of know where your zip code is, or you put it in there and bingo, you got 3 letters pre-generated for you to your various representatives. They make it very easy for you. Just do it. And if you're a politically minded person, if you're at a political fundraiser and you get a 30-second ear of somebody, let them know that water and water quality is important to you. It's all it takes. Just stay in the ear of the appropriators and the policymakers.
In addition to membership for headcount, because I've discussed this with others, as Captain Mike Anderson and I have discussed several times. We even had one of our sound bites. Headcount comes in very handy because it's a show of force. To put it in military form, it's really it's a show of force.
Yeah.
When it comes to these different groups, and I know this applies to Captains for Clean Water and BTT, but what do we need to do to help keep this momentum moving forward? As far as, do we need to do more membership recruitment?
I don't know. I think the fishing public, those of us that care about it, get it, and we've been vocal. We just can't be complacent. And I'll say this: as we move forward, Captains has been at this now 10 years.
Where's the time?
I know. You just can't give up. We have to stay unified, and we have to continue to care. And we can't think that just because we're building a reservoir down south now that the problem is solved. That's not our 100%. I forget how many SERP projects alone that still haven't been started that need to be funded and started. They're starting to work on them, but for almost 20 years, not one project was completed. It's given the green light to.
Yeah, I remember voting on that years ago.
Yeah, right. I think it was 2000. So almost 25 years ago, but we just can't give up. And I like to say it took us over about 100 years to really screw this up, our water up to the point that it is now. We're not going to fix it overnight, but we can if we stay vigilant. And every day, I believe what I'm seeing is it getting better. I've seen the mosquito lagoon, the grass, and the as they call it, the submerged aquatic vegetation get decimated a couple of years ago. Just decimated. It wasn't grass anywhere. And there has been a tremendous resurgence in the grass. It's come back, and the water quality is significantly better today than it was 4 or 5, even 10 years ago. So, yes, you see progress being made, but sometimes it feels like baby steps. And I know people feel we're not going fast enough. It's not, not enough is being done. The projects are there. They're being permitted. We're doing a ton, like up in the Mosquito Lagoon, Indian River area. We're doing a ton of septic to sewer conversions where we're getting these septic tanks out and away, and it's being put into central sewer systems where it can be properly treated and dispersed. That's, and there's other projects where some of these, as I guess what you would call, some of the main pollutants or some of the main nutrients is nitrogen and phosphorus, sometimes known as N and P. They don't ever leave. Once you put them in, you have to take them out. So the water management districts and all, they are getting funding, and they are removing, sludge, and they're removing muck, areas of muck that weren't there in the past. They're doing, one of the most cost-effective ways to get rid of phosphorus in a water source is actually something called a gizzard shad harvest. Extremely cost-effective. And we get a ton of phosphorus out by harvesting the shad. So, it's being done, and the government, the water management districts, the Corps of Army engineers, they've all heard, and they've got some of the right people in place. Things are happening, and like a lot of things in life, probably none of us think fast enough, but it's as fast as we can do it and get it done right now. And so I think we have turned the ship, and we're just starting to it's going to be a while, but it's not getting worse right now, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So we've turned the tide, or turned the ship right now, and we've just got to get some momentum. We got to keep up the momentum, and we can't get battle fatigue is what I'm saying. We've got to stay vigilant and stay on it, because we are making a difference. We are seeing differences in the water quality. I think we're seeing the fishing coming back and getting better in a lot of areas. But that doesn't mean we give up. It's not like we won a few battles right now. We haven't won the war yet. We've got to stay with it. It's going to be a marathon. This is not a sprint.
Yeah, very true. Of the different conservation groups that you're affiliated with there at Hells Bay, how many of them have a volunteer role for those who would like to take an active interest and participate?
Every one of them I know of. Yeah, absolutely. They'll take free labor at any time.
I was just curious. I know some of them seem to emphasize that when you look at their websites compared to others. I was just curious which ones have that, ability to be able to recruit and use that type of volunteer help to be able to fund these different projects or work on them, or
all of the
oyster bed restoration, all of these different,
I think almost all of them do to some extent. I mean, like I said, captains really need you to be that voice. When they need bodies in Tallahassee, get in your car and drive up there. It's a volunteer, effort. It's not something you can go and probably do every day, with them. It's not like you can go show up at the office. I don't know. Maybe if you wanted to go, you can call them up and they'd let you stuff, envelopes or pack up their hat orders that they get online over the weekend. I don't know, Dave, but right. But other organizations, you're right. They've got big drives where they're actually putting in, oyster reefs or something. So
right. I know the CCA is very involved in that type. Where they're building oyster beds and things of that nature. I just didn't. Yeah. I wasn't aware of the other ones that much.
But I see other ones that'll have, cleanup days where you go out on the flats and pull up a bunch of crab traps that are abandoned, or God, I've done a couple of them where we brought in everything from toilet bowls out there and all sorts of weird stuff you pull off and say, where the heck did this get out here on the flat? So, but there's some organizations have those things. We haven't done it in a couple of years now. But we used to have what we called the trash can slam, where it was a little fishing tournament where you went out and tried to catch some. But then the reality is you win the tournament by the amount of pounds of trash you bring in. So you got points for, ladyfish and some of these other things, which was a great fun tournament. But really, you made the great gains and won the tournament on bringing in pounds of garbage. And I mean, we brought in all sorts of weird stuff.
I'm sure. I don't know if you've read our article on Project Restore. I'm just curious as to your thoughts on that mangrove restoration initiative, and somehow see if you can get some support for that concept. Have you checked that out yet? And what was your ideas on that one?
I actually have not checked that one out. Tell me a little bit about it so your people can know about it.
Well, our idea that we came up with was to be able to get some more mangrove restoration, both commercial and in residential. The biggest, I think, pushback on some of that is the regulations on how they're going to be managed once you plant them. There's a lot of them that I think need to be, if you're spending a lot of money to have a waterfront property, you're paying for the view. Mm-hmm. But to limit them to only be able to cut these mangroves at 6 feet, well, now you're cutting into that view. Whereas if you brought it down to a shrub level, just think of all of this natural, really for all practical purposes, aquaculture that you're doing by allowing to have areas for these tiny little fish to grow up to be the big fish that you're going to pick a fight with one day. When we look at the economic value again, and I sometimes think that's not touted enough to be able to get people's attention. My father taught me a long time ago, you want to get somebody's attention, hit them in the wallet. That concept of being able to grow mangroves and write off that for public, for people who have barren seawalls. I mean, there's a lot of seawall out there that is not being utilized. But a barren seawall, other than the oysters and stuff growing on it, if there's enough fresh water around, generally does not provide a lot of nursery habitat that we've lost.
So is your idea you'd plant them and then still be allowed to keep them at shrub level, but
higher?
But that wouldn't change the regulations on what is currently natural mangrove trimming. I mean, I don't. Okay. Right. Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you?
Back what we've lost over the last.
I mean, I think it'd be a good idea. You have to basically get with DEP on their rules and say, look, if we get a permit and I'm going to put in something that doesn't exist, if I do that, I want to keep it at this level, and I don't know why that wouldn't be a bad idea, or even why that isn't a good idea. But then again, I'm a boat builder. and maybe some mangrove specialist will tell me why that's really not a good idea. I don't know. What's the pushback been on it?
Well, I think the biggest pushback that I've observed is they didn't want to plant them because then they would be regulated having this line of trees in front of their waterfront view.
Well, it makes sense if you have an area they're not there and you got a permit, let's say, saying there's nothing here now, I'm going to put these in, but since I'm putting them in, I get to keep them at a certain level.
Well, that was my point of contention when I was writing the article. Something is better than nothing. A barren seawall,
right.
Especially when you've got a hurricane bearing down on you. So now you have the insurance benefits of diffusing that wave action.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to knock something down, hit it straight on. Well, by having mangroves in front of it, as we well know, helps diffuse some of that wave action, just like reefs do.
And then if you look at it that way, if the propagules end up growing and dropping and you end up with more of them, you're going to end up with more natural mangroves in other places that maybe they're not there now, which would be a good thing. So
it's a nursery.
From a boat builder's standpoint, unless I get someone that hears this podcast and calls me up and tells me that was a dumb idea and here's why, and I go, yeah, I can see that. I agree with you. I don't see that why it wouldn't be a bad idea. I think it'd be a great idea.
Well, I just wanted your opinion on that. Just because I know so much that you're involved in these different conservation groups and politically, just to see if that concept could gain some sort of traction on the idea. I mean, there's a lot of seawall out there.
Generally, I like it, You're right. I don't know why that hadn't been implemented. Sounds like a great idea.
I didn't want to see it start off and be a huge bureaucracy where you had to run through X, Y, and Z. And the other concept that was part of that restoration was to be able to pitch.
Well, but here's the thing: what you need to do is be able to document and have something. Like I said, I don't know about bureaucracy on it, but you want the ability to do it. And if there's nothing there, you need to have, in my opinion, you need some sort of a permit or something, so that what you're doing is guaranteeing your right to cut them because you're putting them in. They weren't there naturally. That way, you know what I mean. That's where the bureaucracy would come into. It would just guarantee your right to trim them. Right, so that's that's the way I look at it. Anyway, it's my opinion.
Well, Chris, brother, it's always great having you on, and I do appreciate you spending some time with us today to talk about this important topic to not only Florida, but any of our coastal states or coastal nations to be able to maintain.
That's why you call it the Flats Nation, right?
Exactly. Exactly. But it's from an economic standpoint. It's just such a huge industry, and I think that's kind of forgotten about at times. When they look at, what does citrus in the state of Florida bring, or what does tourism bring? And I think when you look at this, separate from commercial fishing, it's huge. And I think that being able to bring that aspect and remind everybody of that.
And I don't think people sometimes remember what it, not only what it brings, but there's multipliers. I mean, as people come here to fish, they're going to go to Wendy's and they're going to go to 7-Eleven to get their sandwich in the morning. There's so many legs to it that I think people forget in the overall economic equation of the value of the fishing.
Yeah, the gasoline that's bought, the trips to Publix, the whatever.
Yeah,
just the hotels. Everything.
Right.
It's
the ice from Publix. I mean, you just think of the number of businesses and that's the multiplier effect of tourism in general. But this is a tourist activity that does have part of that multiplier effect that tourism does bring to us.
Very true. Well, Chris, brother, I appreciate you spending time with us again.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Looking forward to doing another show with you and following up on some of these topics and being able to do some progress reports and see how things have gone along. But
well, I just leave the disclaimer out there. I'm just a boat builder, guys.
Get it.
And this is just my opinion.
I get it.
So,
well,
my view and opinion.
Well, mine's opinion also too. But I wanted to applaud your efforts because I know you spend a tremendous amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Help with moving these ball forward.
And like I said, I like to say it's in our DNA, and we do it. I'd be doing this if I wasn't a boat builder, but I do have a from the Hells Bay, platform. I do get a little louder voice sometimes than others, and I'm glad to use it in hopefully a positive way for our fishing and conservation efforts here, particularly in the state of Florida.
I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us today, and looking forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Thank you, Dave.
Sir.
And a huge thank you to our amazing guest, Chris Peterson of Hells Bay Boatworks, for keeping us informed about their great conservation efforts. At flatsnation.com, protecting our waters is a top priority, and we've dedicated an entire section to conservation-related topics. So make sure you check that section out. While you're here, also don't forget to explore our store. From casual apparel to Flats Nation technical wear, our gear is designed for comfort, whether you're battling a big tarpon in 90-degree heat or just enjoying the great outdoors. With some great reviews and ready-to-ship options, you can browse our entire section to blend in colors and order yours simply by clicking on the store link in the top title bar of any page. And while you're shopping, make sure you grab some great Afrayo coffee with our exclusive discount and free shipping for our friends and fans of the nation. And lastly, a big shout out again to our friends at Fujifilm for sponsoring this episode. We thank you again for your support.
We We hope you enjoyed our show today. Flats Nation is your answer for reviewing your products and services related to flats and inshore fishing, but that's not all. Flats Nation is the perfect place to advertise your products or services that connect to our passion. Do you have a product for a tow vehicle? How about a new lure? Want to advertise your guide service? Call us at 941-271-5055 or email us at info@flatsnation.com and let us get the desired exposure. And now, here's the rest of Dave's awesome tune to run the skiff back home with. Tight lines and God bless.